And here we have the writer-director of the film, Whit Stillman, and the editor, Chris Tellefsen. Whit, I'll start. You made this film when you were in your mid-late 30s, and how close is to your life as a 20-year-old or a teenager?
It's very close. And I was trying to think like why sort of the screenplay seemed to work in retrospect. And it's because I actually did fall in with a group of very funny, entertaining, different people who stayed consistent. So the dark-haired, judgmental Jane in this movie doesn't have dark hair, but she's still very judgmental. And the fellow who was going to marry a very rich woman did marry a very rich woman. And so a lot of things did sort of, the characters, the real people were funny. And actually, tonight we do have the actual Sally Fowler with us. So I'd like to introduce Molly Ferrer of Southampton. She's made a fortune in real estate, apparently, from what I've heard. And the character named Audrey was because I was thinking as writing the script, well, I won't be able to get name actors, but I can think of Audrey Hepburn playing the part. So she became Audrey. And Molly was always talking about her Aunt Audrey, because Audrey Hepburn was her aunt, married to Mel Ferrer, her uncle. And so that was another inspiration.
The writing, you often say that you were inspired, to make films because of the 1980s New York New Wave and Spike Lee and Jim Jarmusch and John Sayles, and yet this film seems to reference a whole different kind of filmmaker. It seems like an earlier era. I'm thinking Preston Sturges and Lubitsch to be obvious. Is that the case?
Well, this actually is something that both Chris and I share. That I think we grew up in a period when there were a lot of old movies being shown on television for free, and many channels, and the independent channels were filling in their schedules with movies at all hours of the day.
I was obsessed with the 4:30 movie and the $1 Million movie.
What's the 4:30 movie?
The 4:30 movie was on every afternoon at 4:30. And as a matter of fact, I watched it so obsessively after school. It was in a 2-hour format, and it shifted to a 90-minute format. I would stay awake at night thinking about films that I had seen that were in the 2-hour format that were cut down for the 90-minute format. And that was, I think, what put into my head this essence of editing and the way those changes change everything. That everything is a.
This is your first
dominant.
film?
It's like Prime cutting out the nightmare sequence of It's a Wonderful Life to make it run shorter with all their ads.
It would take me a long time to talk about.
This was your first film, and this is your first film. How
Yes.
did you encounter each other?
You sort of cheated because you had sort of done another film first.
Cheated. I did. Well, actually, the whole connection was, I edited a short film. There was a group of people they were fresh out of the semiotics program of Brown. It was Christine Vachon, Todd Haynes, and Barry Ellsworth. And they put together a nonprofit company called Apparatus, and they were going to produce short films. And I edited one of those short films. It was called Muddy Hands, written and directed by Evan Dunsky, who actually in his later life created Nurse Jackie. But it was a wonderful short, and it got a lot of play. But Brian Greenbaum, who had a connection to that, was a real fan of it and really liked my work. And he was working with Whit and said, "You've got to meet Whit. You got to this is a really interesting project." And Whit sent me the script, and I was like, "This is so interesting. This is so unusual. It's so kind of tribal." And I love the contradiction of making a low-budget movie about rich people. It just was fascinating to me. And I went to the set, and they were doing the Truth Game. And I saw this group of the actors, and they just looked like people that knew each other their whole lives. And there was something so knit about it. And then yeah, I continued and worked with Whit on editing the film.
So it's better to hire a editor by showing the actors on set rather than showing the footage, because the first editor who'd been proposed to us came in to look at dailies, and it was the day that we hadn't realized that one of the shots was going to be an empty frame of a seat on a badly upholstered sofa, that after a minute and a half, Chris Eigenman as Nick finally sits down in it. And we realized later that you actually only have to roll the camera when the actor is going to be in the shot. No. And so that editor didn't want to work with us. So we said, well, just show them the actors.
It worked.
There is a word that has been unfortunately used so much that it feels like a cliche, but the film as a time, and as I rewatched it this morning, the film has a real timeless quality, and part of this lasting effect that has emotionally is the balance between to be about a class, like a specific social milieu, and yet to be to have things that people that don't belong to that club can relate to. Can you tell a little bit about writing that balance? And
well, I think the actual germ, the very first sort of inkling of something was Vincent Canby had an article about the Fred Astaire, Ginger Roger movies, sort of Top Hat, The Gate of Orsay, those things. And he said that no one wears white tie anymore in the world. And so I wrote a letter to the Times, a very short letter, protesting this, saying, and I billed myself as the executive director of the New York Committee to Save the White Tie. Because I knew that there's still, white tie. If you get a Nobel Prize, you get to wear a white tie. And, various opera nights, things like that. So I wanted to make a film, and when I started writing it, I was in my early 30s, and I had a day job, which I should not have quit. And it took sort of 4 years, only being able to work when all the artists I was representing were fully engaged. Then I could go off and write, because I found that selling and writing canceled each other out. You couldn't do both. And the dilemma was sort of whose film is it? And in not ever really making the choice, I think it enriched the film finally. So it started out being the Tom Townsend, the outsider perspective, the guy coming in who pretends to be from a different point of view, although not really. And then it turns out that's not very sympathetic. So I tried to make it Audrey's film. I tried to go back and add the scenes, like the first scene of her. But there's so much Tom material in the movie already. And then I found the sociological observation very interesting. So all the Charlie stuff, sociology. And then the Nick character sort of took over, again, based on a very funny guy who I first met at a dinner at Molly's house. And those characters sort of took over the protagonism of the film. And so the failure to make a choice, I think, enriched it, and having sort of 4 protagonists. And coming to these screenings, I often come in during the man at the bar scene. And I think he's sort of the 5th protagonist. So I think that's an important perspective, that guy.
It must have not been easy to get the film financed, and at the end of the credit you can see there is a lot of Mrs. and Mrs. and can you talk a little bit about the production and how to maximize what I believe it started with a really low budget, and then it was just like a low budget as opposed to
Yes. So I mean, I talk a lot about the inspiration of John Sayles, Jim Jarmusch, and Spike Lee making their really good, super low budget films. But in fact, I'd started earlier representing Spanish cinema comedy directors in Madrid, the Madrid School of Comedy, Fernando Colomo, Fernando Treva. And they were doing it earlier than the Americans, and inspired by the French New Wave, etc. And I was on set as an actor playing the stupid American in a Spanish film, El Bobo Americano, because they found my Spanish comical or whatever. And since I was the least important person in a kind of important cast, I was there the whole summer. And I was trying to write the Barcelona script at that time, and I realized
Barcelona Bean is your second film. Yeah.
I realized that's too complicated a project. I need to do something really tiny that I could shoot essentially in a living room in New York, just people talking. And then learning about low budget film, that if you got a tiny insurance policy, you could get licenses, permits to shoot anywhere in the streets of New York. So I started writing all those scenes. And so one of the Spanish directors I worked with, he said his cash budget was $50,000. And I knew in the rental apartment I was in, the apartment was going co-op, if I could manage to borrow $35,000 for a year, I could sell it for $85,000 and make $50,000. So I could make a $50,000 film, and that's where it started. So I was writing a script to make for $50,000. And fortunately, some investors came in, and other people came in, and but it was that idea to have a very rich subject to make a film look kind of better than it was.
And Chris, when you finally saw the footage, how ratio wise, because this is such a it's a dialogue film, and but it's so precisely written, and how much was already in film, that the timing and
it was filmed intelligently. It was there were scenes that were covered, and there were scenes that were like walk talks, which is kind of Hollywoody. It's a little like, there's a lot of that in Preston Sturges and other Hollywood films. But
describe for us.
Okay, the obviously the scene, like the scene where Nick tells the story of Polly Perkins, there was a lot of coverage on that scene. So I was really able to play with it and get it to hit all the marks. Then there's obviously the scenes where there's walking and talking, and the actors did a lovely job, and their timing was very good. Some of the challenges were some of the non-actors that were in it. Like in the first scene with Audrey and her mother, that was a very lovely person. Her name is Linda Gillies, and she was the mother of Isabel, who played Cynthia. And she was terrified. She was absolutely terrified, and it was pretty rough for her. It was like a 2-page scene, and as you can see, I reduced it to like 4 shots. And they work. I mean, she works, and she's great. The other scene that was very challenging is the Roger scene, the scene at the bar. He was a non-actor also, and he was quite nervous, but he was very authentic, and that worked really well. And the 2 guys are so terrific, Charlie and Tom, that they played it so I could really play against all those aspects. Another interesting thing is like, Carolyn Farina, who plays Audrey, was just heartbreaking. She had so much charm, and she was so warm. And like in a scene like the end scene, going to Rick von Sloniker's, which is like almost an edge of slapstick, because it's like very broad, the situation, like with the fake gun and with the panties and all this stuff. And she anchors the scene, and I really made sure to always go to her to make that connection, because she's just so...
That little subtle smile she does, that it's all a joke. You used to talk about that.
Gorgeous. It's just so beautiful.
That smile saved a mess. The scene was an embarrassing mess. Let's be honest.
Because it was too broad.
It was ridiculous. But I think the line about the Derringer and her look saved the scene.
Yeah.
But true. Also, one of your anecdotes about the man at the bar scene was the fact that since he wasn't a trained actor, his movements weren't all identical as far as drinking.
Oh yeah, there was.
And so he relaxed when he drank, and so you went back. So we thought the scene was hopeless, and you told me, "Whit, go away," and I think I know how to fix it. I'll call you. And you called me back, and the scene worked. And it's because you said you found that he relaxed and was not more natural whenever he did something with his drink. So he looks like a dipsomaniac, but and also the actors were late in the shoot, totally in their character, by the time we shot that. And he was actually one of our locations. He had given us a location. So they had been the previous night with him, very impressed with him because he's an incredibly impressive guy. He only froze a little bit with a camera like everyone does. And he was a big bicycler, you know, a real athlete, and they really admired him. And so they were bringing kind of their being in the role, listening to him, and you sort of played it on them, listening to him. It was a really brilliant save. So I can't really talk well at this Q&A because normally my whole shtick is we were in this terrible jam, and then this editor saved it. And so we were going to have to go out and shoot another debutante party because we only had this really edge of one debutante party. We're going to have to go back and shoot another debutante party. And you found the footage that we shot of the Bergdorf window of the little dancers going in. So that could go in between the before and after shot of the parties.
And there were some murals too.
And then we were going to come out here and shoot a better ending. So the ending was so terrible. And you said, oh no, I'll just do a freeze frame. And so the freeze frame at the end. So these two things saved us all these shooting days we had no money for. It's great. It's a good editor.
The thing is, I mean, it was a very special project, and it means a great deal to me. And you know, it's so wonderful to see it living 36 years later and being relevant and entertaining and lovely.
Now, speaking of the end, Southampton doesn't get a good rep in the film. Anything anecdotal you wanna share?
I think it looks nice. I think it looks nice. That was the house of an investor also.
But also,
that was actually a very important fellow because not only did he invest and let us shoot the outside of the house, but he also misunderstood the Lionel Trilling essay about Mansfield Park. And so he told me this, like I said, well, I'm loving Mansfield Park. He said, oh, how can you love that? How can you, Lionel Trilling said, it's impossible today, virtuous heroine. And then I read the essay and it didn't really say that. It's just, that's a red herring at the beginning. Anyway, he's given me so much material and also invested. And actually the shot of there are 9 million stories out there or 8 million stories, that is from his apartment on Park Avenue. So we shot down.
You mentioned Mansfield Park. There is clearly that the film is a love letter to Jane Austen and to me to Francis Scott Fitzgerald.
Yes, absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with literature and?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but my sister is the person who's always recommending good books, and she at 15 she gave me Fitzgerald, This Side of Paradise, and I was completely seduced by it. And I also met one of Molly's friends who I fell for, the Serena Slocum character. And that just changes your life. So I went with the Fitzgerald vision of the New York rich girl. And then later, I hated Jane Austen because I'd read Northanger Abbey when I was a sophomore in college and thought it was stupid because I'd never heard anything about a Gothic novel. I didn't know what she was making fun of. And then my sister insisted, and I read Sense and Sensibility, and loved Jane Austen, and was trying to write the script. Like, you kind of want to cleanse the palate. You want to kind of read something else. So I just pick up Jane Austen, read a couple of pages, and then go back and work on the script. And then it gave us a plot because there's this situation in Mansfield Park that we have in the film. And then in real life, I'd seen that thing of people doing the truth game and thinking, and certain people saying, oh, this is harmless, this is fine, and seeing just disasters happen if people have to answer questions honestly. It's a very bad idea. Never do that.
Raise your hand. I want to start giving some answers. Okay, there's one right here. Now, hold on for the mic.
I actually wanted to congratulate you on a more recent film, A Quiet Place.
Thank you.
I had no interest in that movie. I was on an airplane, and I just thought it was the most amazing thing. And I bring it up because normally you don't think of an editor when you see a movie, but I immediately said, "Wow," because there's almost no dialogue.
There was a point we had a version with no dialogue.
No dialogue.
Yeah, but we put back the scene that had that little bit.
So how do you get from a movie like this where it's driven by dialogue to some degree to a movie like that?
Well, there's a 25-year span.
That's what I'm asking.
You work is what you do. You work hard.
Yeah. Anything more specific?
I'm done 41 films. So I would say it's like it's my craft, it's my work, and I put as much care into dialogue as I do into something where it's about tension and surprise and specific jump scares, which are, very precise.
And Chris, you're also credited as the music editor on
Yes,
this.
I cut all
there is
the
a whole
music.
other level that is not dialogue.
The music's a
right?
whole story.
Well, I just sort of recognized that I made the wrong career choice. You've done 41 films and I've done 5. So I think I made a mistake. So if you're
It
thinking of
takes a
becoming
lot more time
if you're
to
thinking
get-
of becoming a writer, director, become an editor. Also, it's well known in the business that the editors are the smartest people in the film business. Very well known.
But can you talk a little bit about the music, because the music has
Yes.
its own rhythm and sorry, it's very
Well,
important.
interestingly, before Metropolitan, and literally like very close to it, I edited a very funky kind of a performance movie that was called Revolution, about 3 like Marxists who want to blow up the World Trade Center.
Uh-oh.
And this was in 1987, but there was music in it, and the music was good. The music was interesting, and the composer was this fellow named Tom Judson, and I thought maybe he'd be interesting to draw into this, because music was going to play a very large part in the movie and make it authentic and beautiful. And Tom had like a kind of a trunk of music. And so Whit and I listened to like these different, and we drew the Metropolitan Begin, the love theme, You'll See Me, and a few other things. And he just played it on piano on a cassette, and I just like started placing it and figuring it out. But then we had to produce it. It had to be produced. And Whit gave him like $1.50 to do something, and he was really not capable of bringing it to that place. And then Whit found Mark Suazo.
It's your idea. So I'm realizing that the film is almost entirely Chris's creation in many ways, because I had forgotten that you brought in Tom Judson, and then you had the idea of calling up the 92nd Street Y music director and ask him to recommend composers, because they're working with composers there. And so we had 3 composers who came down. The first one came and watched the film in the Steenbeck, laughed through it, and then said, well, I can't do this job. This is a job for Mark Suazo. The second guy comes down, laughs throughout the whole film, and then says, the right person for this job is Mark Suazo. The second person was a gifted conductor and pianist also. And so Mark Suazo comes in to see it. No reaction, just silence, painful silence. And Mark Suazo did this amazing job with the music, and I've worked with him on every project since then.
Fantastic.
And he brought back the fellow who was number 2 to, I think, play the piano and conduct different things. So he worked with us in a couple of films.
And Mark put together like what was it, like a 6-hour session with the musicians
the
playing.
thing is,
it was
Mark was a
astounding.
consummate music professional, was working in every aspect, arranging for the New York Pops, and he knew all the top studio musicians. So we had the most wonderful musicians coming in to play the music. It was incredible.
And the classical, the Smetana was done, the string quartets, which we sped up. Remember, we sped up because it gave it a little energy.
I remember one thing where we had the pianist from the Johnny Carson's Tonight Show, was a very good pianist, but that was one of his gigs. And I think it was a whole orchestra just played by the piano. So he recorded one hand, and then again, I mean, he did it in 2 different parts, overlapping or something crazy like that. Anyway,
It was like phenomenal. It was very
it's
exciting.
amazing what an editor contributes to a film. It's incredible.
Another question, right there.
Thank you. Sir, I don't have a question so much as I have a comment, and that yeah. No, it's actually a good one. I found something that surprised myself watching the movie that I absolutely loved, and that was the fact that there was no smartphones, no cell phones, no Facebook, no Twitter, no, if they said some nasty things to each other, you had to do it to your face. you know, and I think that I found, oh, you know what? I actually enjoy those times when you used to do that. There was none of this keyboard courage that we have today. You know, these people said, so I appreciate that.
We also have tonight, if he's still here, maybe he left in disgust, but one of the stars of the film is actually in the audience. Everyone's probably noticed the North Greenwich Preppy.
First row here.
The North Greenwich Preppy. So please, Donald Lardner Ward, who's here.
You seem to be in an awfully good mood tonight, Stillman.
How were you cast? How did you get that part?
You know, I came in, I saw an ad in Backstage. I was a young actor. I was training, and there was an ad, open call, you know, making this film. And it said, you know, very low budget, 16 millimeter. And I thought, well, this would be a great opportunity to learn. And I came in and I read for Charlie's part. And then you had me come back in again to read a second time. And you said, you know, I really have this other actor that I really think I want to play this part, Taylor Nichols, which was a fantastic decision on your part. And but you said, would you do this small role? And I said, absolutely. And it was, you know, it was my first thing I ever did on film. And it was, in a way, it was easy because I was an outsider, sort of showing up at this party where everybody else was hanging out. And I got to the set. And these actors had been together, you know, working together, and it was impenetrable. Like there was no way. I was in the party scene at first, and then then you know, came and shot the scene. And I think, I think you gave me 2 takes. I think that was it, because that's the way that kind of movie. Right. That's the way the movie was shot. But it was a great experience. And you know, I have to say, Whit doesn't get nearly as much credit as he's due for being a major influential part of the independent film movement, particularly in New York. You know, he talks about, you know, Jarmusch and Spike and John Sayles, and but the next wave, you know, was Whit and Hal Hartley, you know, and who made The Unbelievable Truth and Metropolitan in the same year, basically. And there were a number of, I made a film in 1992, totally inspired by the experience of how well the film turned out. I literally expected, I don't know if this film is going to go anywhere. It'll be a little practice as an actor. But there are a lot of people after that, you know, this next group, that were very inspired by, I think, this movie, for good reason.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. That was a great set, though. It was the Surrogates Court building downtown. So we have a wonderful, rich legacy in Manhattan of the influence of Tammany Hall. So Tammany Hall is a corrupt party machine, like to spend much too much money building courthouses and things like that. And during the day, it was a scandal. But now it's a great heritage. We can shoot in these wonderful locations that looks better than Conclave occasionally. Well, not that, but.
That's not hard. There's a question right there.
Thank you. In terms of your giving a legacy, we recently watched Damsels in Distress, which is a gas, and seeing Greta Gerwig and Aubrey Plaza in a movie together is wonderful. But the thing we most noticed, it was like seemed to be a complete inspiration for Greta Gerwig in the whole aesthetic and sensibility and humor in Barbie. Have you ever looked at Barbie and thought about that connection?
I've heard that said by some people, but I wouldn't want to take responsibility. I love that you called it a gas. I think we should have used that. I think that would have placed the film sort of better for the future audience. But thank you for saying that.
How hard it was to get a distributor for Metropolitan? Can you tell us a little bit about the
I mean, there's some studio executives you run into, and they say things like, "Well, any good film is going to find its way. Any good film," and that is such total nonsense, because we were just dead so many times. Everyone turned it down, and all the sort of tiny distributors I knew who thought it might be, you know, right for them, they said no marketing hook. And you really have to get a film in front of an audience and have it work in front of an audience for them to have the confidence of thinking of buying it. They're not going to buy it. They have to see it 3 times in front of an audience before they buy it. So we got turned down from Sundance and found our way in the back way. We got turned down everywhere. And it really is important to know how, to try to get the showing of your film in the right context, like with an audience that's going to understand it. And if you just send the audience so they watch it in their screening room alone and watch, one reel and then stop, it's fatal. So we were very lucky. So we actually failed upwards. So all the small distributors rejected it. Everyone we thought plausible rejected it. And then we got to Sundance, we got in the back way of Sundance, and there's an electrifying screening there in the Egyptian Theater. Again, it's a movie theater. It plays well in the movie theater. It plays really badly in the conference center. And there was a New Line executive there who was just going to watch movies, not trying to buy a film. And they also wanted to hire our producer's representative. So they started talking about maybe the film, but they didn't make any offer for it until it was in the New Directors series at MoMA, and they saw the press reaction, they saw the press screening, and they finally bought it.
And is it true? I'll get to the question. Is it true that and the film made about $3 million in theater, and it's like at least a third of it was New Yorkers?
Yes, the film grossed $3 million, and I figured, or I estimated that $1 million came out of Manhattan, because we had a record-breaking run at the Paris Cinema, which was so perfect for it. And then it shifted over to the Angelica, and it was still playing. So it opened in August, did really well in East Hampton. And then it was in the Angelica, a great run, and the 10 best list came out, the Vincent Canby 10 best list. So we broke records in August at the Paris Cinema and in December at the Angelica. So, and I think that's why it got a nomination, because this is before the very expensive campaigns. And the writers' branch, which votes on screenplays, is located in New York and Los Angeles, and the film played here for 7 months. So people could have seen it without any of the usual promotional screenings.
And the film was nominated for Best Script. There's a question here.
How do you think the film would be different if you were making it today? Same concept, same kind of people, but how would it be different if you were making it today?
Would it be different?
I just can't answer that. I have no. The thing is also the film. You're talking about if there is an element of timelessness in the film, perhaps it's helped by the fact that we were having to cheat when it was set. So my memories were from sort of a period from sort of 1967 to 1973 of these parties. And in the film, there serves the transition from the pre-Woodstock atmosphere to the post-Woodstock atmosphere. So in the second half of the film, the orgy week is a little bit like what the spring was our debutante year. So we were still square in December, but by April, people were pretty weird and taking drugs and long hair. And I think the fact that when we came to make the film, we didn't have a budget to make it a particular period. So we just tried to have everything as far in the past as we could and let people imagine when it's set. And fortunately, people who keep their cars on the streets of Manhattan all night have really old cars. And so that looked better.
And you got one of the last of the checker cabs in there.
Yes, the big production debate was we had this one Hollywood rental checker cab that was absolutely terrible. It was really, really bad. And I knew that I was going to be on the floor of the taxi riding out to the Hamptons. The sound man and I are on the floor, by the actors. And so I said, we have to get a better checker cab. And Brian said, no, this is a professional checker cab the industry uses. We can't just get anyone's checker cab. So he won the argument. He got really upset and said, okay, don't get mad, don't quit. But he immediately saw a checker cab, went over, got the guy's name, and talked to the man. And Mr. Beasley, a nice gentleman from the West Indies, who had this really well kept really well preserved checker cab, and that became our checker cab going out to the Hamptons, which was much better than the other one. And then Brian made it his go-to picture cab. So Mr. Beasley got a lot of Hollywood business. Anyway.
There's also, when did the automat close after that? Like next year?
We're really lucky, I think, in all the films. Maybe we're kind of a jinx. Like if we go there, it's going to close. Like TWA in Barcelona went out of business right after that shot. So
What was the corner of
Horn and Hard Arts, Automat, Horn and Hard Arts, Automat. It was on 42nd Street.
And 3rd, I think.
The sound in that scene is absolutely awful because we couldn't like hire the automat. We couldn't rent the automat, but they allowed us late at night to rope off a little area for the actors. But otherwise, the automat was happening. A lot of old people chatting away in the automat, and they were not going to quiet down for us.
Yeah, that's a 6-hour cup of coffee.
We have there's one right there.
So a couple of people have talked about the sort of connection between the actors on set and how sort of tight they seemed just walking onto the set for the first time. Did you, was that just a chemistry between members of the cast? Did you rehearse and work with them before you started shooting?
There were intensive auditions and some read-throughs, no rehearsals really. I think in this sort of process we do, rehearsals aren't very helpful. And, the shooting conditions were on one hand tough, on the other hand really congenial. We had the chance to shoot in a townhouse that was controlled by a historical institute. And there were 2 people involved in the permission, and I think each thought the other was giving us permission, or we were really close to one or the other. And so we had this one, it's the Alan J. Lerner Mansion on East 71st Street. And it was wonderful. It was this functioning institute. So they had copying machines in the kitchen and things like that. And so Brian Greenbaum, this production manager, could use all their office machines to do our call sheets and things like that. And the actors would be up on the 4th or 5th floor trying to sleep because a lot of them had day jobs, valet parking and stuff like that. And they were completely exhausted. So they're sort of hanging out on this top floor, sleeping. And so it was bonding. And that was really good. So the first 2 days of shooting were Tom Townsend in an apartment on the West Side. That's an aunt's apartment. It was Varian Fry, the man who got the artists out of Europe during the war. So there's incredible art on the walls, but that was my cousin's apartment. And we had 2 days there, and then we went into this wonderful location. And I think that was really bonding for the cast. And
And they were all newcomers, right? They were all pretty much
all
first
newcomers.
film.
They're all, so I think in the front credits it says introducing. And the only person who had professional gigs, maybe you did, I don't know, no. It was Taylor Nichols had been a chorus boy in the Atlantic City production of Sugar Babies with Mickey Rooney. And we got to use his chorus boy chops in Barcelona when he does a Bible dance. He does a wonderful dance with the Bible.
You can kick like right up early.
With Pennsylvania 65000. And Taylor was the one who had paying jobs in the business, and he's still the one who has paying jobs in the business. So he's a great journeyman actor who is constantly working and has a great attitude towards work. And he went over to Barcelona and married a Barcelona girl, just like in the movie. So he imitated the movie.
One more right there, and then that.
Thank you. There seems to be so much humanity in this film that's so effortless and not self-conscious that I'm guessing that was very difficult to write, or did it just flow for you?
Well, I was trying to do a comedy, so that was inadvertent. I don't know. I think a lot of people who are more skilled as filmmakers, try to do their first film when they're 24, 25, 26, and they're going back to write something, back in time, and they do, a film about themselves at 12, and any story about a 12-year-old boy is going to be sad. And I think I was lucky writing it in my 30s that I could go back and they were 17, 18. And that's interesting. It has its aspects of poignant, but it's not horribly sad like being 12. And so I think like the real people that I could sort of somewhat remember how things were really helped. I mean, it's really surprising. There's tons of warmth, I think, in that group. The people were really warm, and that came out, I guess. Thank you.
Well, it's also to go back to what the gentleman with the orange jacket was asking. That, the film is, and the warmth is, it's unusual. There's a film about an attainable class. It's a very rarefied world that a lot of people aspire, but it's also really easy to make fun of and satirize. And I think the balance between the warmth and the fun, the level of satire is impeccable.
I mean, one of the sort of agendas of the script was to have the audience hate the characters less. So a lot of people are going to just hate them because of the way they're dressed and their social milieu and all of that stuff that Charlie talks about. And so how can you make them more sympathetic? So one thing is to do the really true thing that these girls really didn't want to have a party, and they hated the whole idea, and they were sad and worried about how they looked and whatever, and what a waste of money, that kind of thing. And so the Audrey scene is like, these people are like worrying about how they look in a dress, and if their ass is too big or something like that, and what her younger brother said. And the other thing is they're doomed to failure. So we don't have to worry about them. We don't have to resent them because they're all doomed anyway, which is often true. And the failure can come later. As I found.
But you have a line, that it's at the beginning of the film that kind of sets it up, and it's quite smart.
I mean, the first scene in this original script was Charlie talking about God. I like the idea of starting just on a close face, talking to someone else, and then we added the meet cute in front of the plaza to introduce how Tom knows them, and then introducing Audrey at the beginning. So it's sort of, the script started there and then went backwards with, I find it's much easier writing beginnings and endings than the middle part. The middle part's the problem.
I think we're done for the evening. And Chris, Whit, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, of course, edited Whit's next film, Barcelona, which we might have a chance to show in a different season.
I thought we were going to talk about Moneyball. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you.